Good afternoon and welcome to this very special show with myself and Clare Evans. Clare and I have known each other for quite a while, and Claire's just had a very busy weekend. Where have you been, Claire?
I have. Yeah, very busy weekend. I've just cycled 158 miles from Brighton to Paris over the course of 4 days. Didn't do it all in one day. Raising money for the Blind Veterans UK, who we had 3 of their blind riders riding tandems with us, and it was just amazing, brilliant experience. So absolutely fantastic.
You did some hard training for that.
I did. I had a sort of unfortunate accident about 3 weeks ago now, where I managed to burn the back of my leg, and that put me out of action for a few days, but for a couple of final training rides, and it was all good. So yeah, really pleased. Fantastic experience.
What did it feel like when you finally arrived at the centre of Paris, the Eiffel Tower?
Oh, that was incredible. The fact that because not many bike rides are able to end at the Eiffel Tower. So the fact that we could come into Paris, we could see Paris on the horizon, and we came in through a lovely route through the park. And there's a stat which looks so it's pretty much used for running and cycling. And then to come up to the Eiffel Tower was just brilliant. Absolutely amazing. So fantastic. Brilliant. Highly recommend it, even if you're not a cyclist. We had a couple of people there who hadn't cycled much at all. Some only started training at the beginning of the year, having not cycled. A couple of people were sort of last minute additions and came in after sort of a couple of weeks notice, and they did amazingly. I mean, they were out ahead of me, so they were doing really well.
Well, my congratulations again. For an awesome challenge completed successfully. Now, we discussed this earlier.
My sponsor page is still open, so if anyone wants to sponsor me, stuck it in the chat.
Indeed, that will stay with the chat.
All donations welcome.
Yes, indeed. Right, now, we had a discussion earlier today, and we decided that today's topic was going to be organising and attending meetings, or something similar to that.
Around meeting, because it's often something people sort of say, oh, I'm always late for meetings, or meetings take up so much of people's time. So, yeah.
So my first question is, which I've taken out of Time Management for Dummies, which you wrote, is, do we need another meeting?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I think the report I did recently for Workfront, there's huge numbers of hours that get wasted in meetings. And I think especially in large businesses, people have a tendency of meetings for the sake of meetings, or meetings where you include absolutely everybody and not everyone needs to be there, or have you got the right people in the meetings? And I think it came out as something like £300 million that this company was spending in meetings. Wow. So those sorts of meetings, you have to look at how much time and resources are actually involved in any one meeting. Yeah. But then something else that can be useful is actually having a meeting to save all those one-off interruptions, the have you got a minute, the not being sure about what the status is. So it sort of depends a bit. Okay.
If you actually organise a meeting, how should you set about it?
Well, it's your first starting point is, what's your objective for the meeting? So why is it that you feel a need for a meeting? What do you want to get out of it? So what's going to be the final outcome, the actions that are required? And then thinking about who needs to be there, making sure the right people are in the meeting who are going to be able to make the decisions, take the actions as a result of the meeting. So that's a pretty good starting point. And then thinking about, you certainly need to have an agenda. Yep. So setting an agenda so people quite clearly know what the start time is and what the finish time is, and that you are going to be sticking to the meeting. I think something else is also about location, because while a lot of people will have on-site meetings, or whether it's an off-site meeting, so you're away from the distractions of people popping back to their desk, again, depending on the objective, and also whether how far people are going to have to travel to a meeting. Because in the days of now, we have things like this with video conferencing and Skype and also Google Hangouts, where you can have meetings virtually. That saves a huge amount of time in the sort of where people would normally travel to an office.
Yeah. Now, are people making?
Oh, sorry, I missed you there. So you froze up on me there, Stephen.
I froze up on myself as well.
Okay.
We're having fun. Are people making increasing use of virtual meetings?
I believe so, yes. I mean, I got a sort of a call a couple of weeks ago and asked to go all the way up to London for a meeting. And I was sort of thinking, well, that's half a day out of my time by the time I've, or if not more, got the train up there, had the meeting, come back down again. It's a big chunk of time for potentially a 1 hour, let's have a chat type meeting. So yeah. I suggested, I think we ended up having it on Skype. So I think people are seeing the benefits of using the tools, the virtual tools, the online space to have those sorts of meetings much, much more, particularly with people remote working. A lot of the time, I think that they tend to use Skype and Google Hangouts, and there are lots of webinars that go on which use those platforms.
Indeed, welcome. Right, okay, if you're going to attend a meeting, what it was here is gone again. If you're going to attend a meeting, how important is it to be on time?
Oh, it's very important. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that frustrates me. Of course, I try never to do it because it is so frustrating. And I think the number of times that people either don't turn up for a meeting full stop because they feel there's something more important they've got to do, which might be the case. There's always urgent stuff that comes up. Or they sort of saunter in late, which doesn't show any respect of, they're not respecting their time that they should be committing to the meeting, or to the other people that are in the room that have set aside a time for that. There are always going to be instances and occasions when you are late for a meeting and some things you can't help. But if you're going to go to a meeting, it's in your diary, you know why you're going to be there, and there is a benefit to being there and there's a good reason, then yeah, you need to turn up on time. I mean, you should ideally turn up well ahead of time so you don't have that last minute rush. Or maybe we can come on to those sort of tips later.
Right, I think I'm back now. I keep freezing. Oh. My apologies for this, Claire. As I say, I'm on the laptop today, and the technology is trying. The internet connection keeps disappearing a bit.
So yeah, internet connection. Mine sometimes goes really slow.
Right. Okay. So increasingly, people are using online meeting resources, but it's still important to turn up on time. And is it important to actually check the agenda before you get there?
Sorry, so you froze again there.
Right. Okay. Is it important to check the agenda before you arrive so that you have some idea what the meeting's about?
Yes, yeah. And if there isn't an agenda for the meeting, then ask. And I mean, some people will say, no agenda, no meeting. I'm not coming unless you can provide me with an agenda that gives me a good reason to be there. I can see what the structure of the meeting is going to be, and also potentially the people who are going to be there. Because one of the things that I'll often ask people is, do you need to go to that meeting? What's the benefit of attending? Particularly if it's a half day or a couple of hours, but it's actually going to be a chunk of their time and potentially whole day traveling, getting there, preparing. And when it comes down to it, they sort of think, well, actually, I don't really need to be there. So yes, definitely make sure you have an agenda for every meeting that you are asked to attend, and that you know your reason and the benefit for being at that meeting.
Indeed. I keep coming and going. We'll persist for another 5 minutes. If you've got problems,
hopefully the recording's getting this.
We'll rearrange. Right. Am I back?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. No.
No, I think you've gone again.
Before I'm frozen again.
Yeah, you froze again.
Right. Okay. I think that this is not going to work properly, Claire. My sincere apologies.
Okay. That's fine.
Well, unless you want to run it as a webinar on your own, but I'm going to keep coming and going.
I can drop in a few more sort of tips on meetings.
Go for it.
But I'm quite happy to sort of to reschedule, as long as the recording's coming through okay. I mean, if you find when you go back over it hasn't, then yeah, I'm happy to redo it. Right. So tips for meetings. Yeah, certainly make sure you have an agenda, and that you also know where you're going to go. I mean, I know everyone tends to rely on sat navs these days, which even I'm starting to use, actually Google Maps a lot of the time, to know where you're going to. So you know where you're going, you have a good idea. And regarding turning up early, always turn up at least, and it does depend on the distance, 5-10 minutes early for a meeting that's pretty close, even if it's in the same building, because that's the fatal thing. And it's the interesting thing with meetings and workshops and any talks that I do, is the people that tend to turn up late are the ones that live the closest. So because there's that sort of, oh, it's only 2 minutes down the road, or I've only got to walk up to the next floor, or up or down, or go into another building, and they don't quite leave enough time. So make sure that you are ready, sitting down for the meeting to start at the starting time, and leave yourself longer if you've got a longer distance to go to get there. So if you've got to drive, if you've got to go anywhere near any of the motorways, like classics, the M25 or the M1, leave yourself plenty of time. So you might even be aiming to arrive half an hour or an hour earlier. I'm going off to do a workshop later this week, and although it's not due to start until 2 o'clock, I will probably get there about 11. Okay. Because it's quite long distance to travel, but also it gives me plenty of time to relax, set up. With technology, I know I can carry on working if I am really early. And that's something to consider. Is a lot of people have this tendency of, oh, well, I'll just send one more email, or I'll just make a quick phone call, or I'll just do one more thing. And before you know it, you're right up against, right, I really need to leave now. And then by the time you've put your things together, you're already starting to run a bit late. And then somebody catches you on the way out, or you get delayed in traffic, or you miss the bus that you were going to get, or you have difficulty finding a parking, and then you're late. So aim to arrive early, and then do any work or make a phone call when you're already there, because then you can eliminate all that stress. And work backwards from when the meeting time starts. So if you need to be there for 2 o'clock and you know it's an hour's journey, say, then you should be leaving by 12:30 at the latest, to allow for parking time. I think that's something else people don't think about. They think about the door to door without the added bits in between, getting a train, walking to and from the station, parking, etc. So give yourself lots of time either side of what you actually think it's going to take.
Yeah, because finding the place could be a problem, can't it?
Yeah. And if you're completely relying on sat nav, I tend to nearly always Google Street View for a location I'm getting to. So again, you have a rough idea of what the road looks like, which really helps. I don't actually have a sat nav, but if you do, just sort of check exactly where it is, so that if you do end up getting lost, or maybe that's another reason to give yourself extra time if you're using a sat nav.
Indeed, I will remember we took a trip to Plymouth and were trying to find the Holiday Inn, and the sat nav sent us the wrong way. Google Street View was more reliable.
Yes, yeah, and sat navs. I mean, the number of times you see, even on directions for sort of hotels and conference places, who will sort of say the sat nav or the postcode will get you close to this destination, but not exactly. So yeah, you do. I think it helps to be able to read a map and have a rough idea, so you know the sat nav's not taking you off to Brighton in somewhere completely different rather than where you actually want to go.
Yeah. What makes a successful meeting?
A successful meeting is, well, essentially it achieves its objective, whatever that might be. So it's about the people, it's about the agenda, and it's about the outcome. And if you get that, I think shorter meetings can be very successful because you're focused on time, you don't tend to go off track. And if you've got the right people in the room, then you're going to have the right conversations and make the right decisions.
Yeah, indeed. And even if you're just an attendee at a meeting, you should be willing to play your own part, a full part.
Yes, yeah. And I think if you're running a meeting, you need to make sure that you've either got somebody who's timekeeper, a note keeper, and someone who's actually running and facilitating the meeting. Because that can be, if you're trying to do all three, then you're busy taking notes and you're not necessarily really listening to what's being said, or you're paying attention to time and trying to keep people on track. Wow. So if you can delegate some of the timekeeping and note-taking responsibility, if there are lots of people in the room, or record them, can be useful, so you can go back over notes. And I think another successful outcome of a meeting is, while several actions may come up, is getting the notes for the meeting out as quickly as possible, with the actions and who's going to be taking them and what's expected. So any follow-ups, dates, as part of that, rather than just having this meeting and then everyone just disappears off and nothing gets done.
Indeed, that's the problem, isn't it? That you go to the meeting, you listen, and you make your notes, and then you don't do anything afterwards.
Yeah, or you sort of think, oh, somebody else was going to do that, or the notes turn up just before the next meeting.
Always true, always true. I mean, even the twinning committee I'm on, the minutes arrive the day before, and the agenda arrives the day before, and you know, very little time then. Yeah.
Well, I mean, also, if there's something in the notes that, if you weren't taking notes yourself about what actions that perhaps were your responsibility, it turns up and you sort of think, oh, okay, all right, I better go and do this. And you rush off and last minute actions just before the meeting starts.
Yeah, which is always fatal, because you may get things wrong.
Same with the agenda.
Yeah.
Something else I always sort of say with meetings is, and it relates to that, is a meeting is never just the 1 hour you spend in the meeting.
Okay.
I mention this all the time when I'm sort of talking to people about when they're scheduling their day and making time for everything. So if you have a 1 hour meeting, or 2 hour, or half a day, there is going to be an amount of preparation time that is part of that. There will also be follow-up that comes out of that, plus any time you need for the actions and the other work that's coming out of it. So you need to take that into account when you're booking a meeting. So, for instance, if people are booking client meetings, you can't have, and you don't want to have, back-to-back meetings, not only taking into account travel time, but the time and effort that's needed in preparing and follow up and reports or notes that need to be taken afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, if you're leading it, it's akin to putting on a presentation, isn't it? If you're leading a meeting.
Yes, yeah.
So
you need to know what it is that you're going to say, which is why it helps to have an agenda. And if you're putting together an agenda, it's also helping you to think about what it is that's needed and who else might need to be in that meeting if you're discussing things.
Indeed. I mean, our meeting on Blab today, we didn't just turn up at 5 to the hour. We chatted on Facebook Messenger first, and decided on the topic and the fact that we'd meet up 10 minutes before, and the whole thing, led by yourself, of course, was pretty well organised.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And I mean, impromptu meetings maybe take a little less time, and sort of status update type meetings that I often suggest, where people are saying they're constantly getting interrupted by their team on sort of throughout the day, 2-3 times a day, is a really good opportunity to add in a meeting to say, right, let's meet once a day, first thing in the morning, 15 minutes, or a couple of times a week, or beginning and end of the week. This is a status update opportunity to ask those questions that you might be thinking about, unless of course it's something urgent. So you can have very short, effective meetings rather than just sort of stretching out the day and having a whole day's meeting.
Now, we mentioned earlier online meetings. And how should you prepare for those?
In the same way, effectively, knowing what it is that you want to say, the people that are involved, also thinking about the technology, because larger meetings with lots of people in can get very either distracting or disjointed, or if you've got a sort of proper video conferencing, even they don't work brilliantly at times, as we're finding at the moment. There's only the two of us. So is it appropriate to have that, or is it actually more appropriate and better to meet face to face? Because there's not a problem with having face to face meetings where you bring your team together, because there may be other benefits on an annual basis or once a quarter. You've got sort of team building and relationship building happening there as well. So it needs to be appropriate. I
totally agree. And testing the technology out beforehand?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. And making allowances for anything, especially technology related, is, I mean, like the problems we're having at the moment, if it doesn't work and it doesn't happen and you need to reschedule, that's fine. I think being familiar with it, or allowing for hiccups, particularly with new technology or new applications and software that's out there.
Yeah, and I have a blab on Thursday with a lady who's never used this technology before.
Okay.
And basically what we're going to do is we're going to meet up the day before at 4 o'clock, and we're going to try it out. Yeah. So Giovanna will get used to the software, and also to being on screen. Because the other thing is about a sort of online meeting is that you're going to appear on screen in front of a lot of people, and there could be nerves. Yeah. There's a great benefit to that, but I certainly think testing out the technology is key. And I've done quite a few, and even with technology that I've used before or use quite regularly, sometimes it changed, sometimes there's an update just before you're trying to get into it, or it takes a while to connect through. So with anything like that, it's definitely turn up early. So even when it's a virtual meeting, make sure that you're there early, ready, like we were chatting online, just to make sure we were all ready to go. And then, okay, I'm going to open up the call. Yeah, indeed. Right. Well, I think we've got gremlins today, but I'm going to, I think, end the recording now.
Okay.
If you'd like to say hello to people who've watched and close the session, recorded side of the session.
Okay.
And take it from there.
Thank you to everyone that's either been listening live or listening on a recording. And if you do want any tips on meetings, there's quite a lot on my blog, which you can get through my website, and Stephen posted the link earlier. And just search through for posts on meetings, and there's plenty of tips on there. And as always, you can ping me an email if you've got any specific tips and queries. And of course, there is reaching across, lots of tips on meetings in Time Management for Dummies. Yours goes the right way around, mine goes the wrong way around.
They both finish up the right way around, which is
that's all right then.
It just looks strange on your own screen. And if you catch this video in the next few Just Giving. Claire has just completed 158 miles cycling from London to Paris, and if you go to the Just Giving page, if you'd like to contribute, then it's a great cause. So just press the button and go for it. Claire, it's been a pleasure as usual. My apologies for the gremlins. As I said, my main PC was out, but hopefully during the course of this last 25 minutes or so, you've imparted some very useful information on meetings.
Good, hopefully.